Explorers, and welcome back to this very spooky edition of Piff Explores. This week I'm going to be diving into the best or worst scary cave movies. Now, before we really get into this, I think that I should change into something a little spookier. That's better. So grab some popcorn and let's crack into it. So originally I wanted to do my top 5 favorite scary cave movies, but then I realized that I only really like 4 of them. So I watched a ton of other scary cave movies besides the ones I'm going to talk about. I didn't want to do The Descent 2 because it's just like Descent 1. Didn't want to do Time Trap because it's not really scary. Devil's Revenge was horrible. Check out us watching that for the first time on Thursday. The Cavern is just horrible. So instead of top 5, we're going to have my top 4 scary caving movies. So our number 4 scary cave movie is the 2005 movie, The Cave. So let's talk about our basic plotline here. So the movie opens with these military-looking dudes who decide that they should blow up this church that was built on top of a cave to keep the monsters in. However, they end up falling into and being trapped inside of the cave, so their story ends there, mostly. Years later, Dr. Nikolai and his team of scientists call in a team of cave divers to continue. So our main cast has these characters. So we got a hot girl, we got a big-headed guy, we got that guy's brother who feels like he has to prove himself, we have a token person of color, we have a hot scientist chick, and we have our main guy, Dr. Nikolai. Everybody else has names, but they're not important. So they get down to base camp 1, which is as far as the scientist team could push before they needed the cave divers. Cave divers decide they're going in one at a time to scout. The first scout finds their next base camp, so the next part where they're out of water, and he then starts meeting the creatures in this cave. Everybody else manages to dive successfully to the second camp, but that's when shit really hits the fan. So throughout their time in the cave, they are picked up one by one by some monsters that have such a huge diversity in what they are. But they all seem to have the same general-ish about them, right? So as they're getting massacred by these creatures, hot scientist lady figures out that the thing they all have in common is this parasite. And the parasite is what had been mutating the creatures, and it allowed them to communicate together. They end up going through some ice caves, and then from ice caves go directly into some fire lava cave, with eventually a few of them making it out. So that's our basic plot line. This movie has a phenomenal ending. So let's talk about the ending of this movie. 2 of the main characters, a dude and a hot scientist chick, are in some European city and they're having lunch. And she goes, I was wrong about the monsters. I thought they were trying to keep us in, but really, they wanted out. When she says that, she looks over her sunglasses and you can see the signs of the parasite in her eyes. And then she just disappears into the crowd. It's intense. So, for that reason, The Cave is receiving the best ending award. I still get goosebumps about it. So that's The Cave. Let's move on. So my number 3 scary cave movie doesn't actually take place in a cave. It takes place in the catacombs of Paris. That's right, I'm talking about As Above, So Below. If you haven't seen this movie, it's basically Harry Potter meets some caves. So let's talk about the basic plot. Our main character's name is Scarlet, and Scarlet is finishing her father's quest to find, drumroll, the Philosopher's Stone. So at the beginning of the movie, to get us into the cave, Scarlet is looking for clues to lead her to the Philosopher's Stone, which leads her to believe that the stone is buried 370.5 feet beneath Nicholas Flamel's grave. Luckily, they're in Paris, and there are the catacombs which run all underneath the streets of Paris. So she enlists help from the rest of our characters to go into the catacombs to find this stone and this treasure. So Scarlet and her band of misfits heading into the catacombs very illegally to find Flamel's stone. What they found was a bit worse. They start off there in the catacombs and things are kind of normal, but there's a few glimpses of like stuff that just gives you the willies. But it's pretty normal up until the point where they actually find the stone. When they get there, the treasure is booby-trapped and the ceiling collapses on them, which ends up crushing one of their party and severely injuring a few others. But Scarlet already has the stone. In case you didn't know, the Philosopher's Stone is the elixir of life and can turn any base metal into pure gold. So it's pretty cool. So she uses it to heal some people, things are fine. Once they start getting out of the rubble, they realize that everything is kind of the wrong side round. Everything's kind of backwards. So they're like, well, we're just going to do everything we did in reverse and leave now. Somehow, even though they're doing everything in reverse, every time they had previously like gone down a pit, instead of going up that same pit, it's the same pit in the floor, and they go down into the room they were in before it. So everything's backwards, but they're still going deeper. They end up going the full over 700 feet beneath the surface, which is rumored to be where the gates of hell are. And you might be thinking, how do you know it's the gates of hell? Well, it's a hole in the wall where you have to crawl on your belly. Very fitting. And above it is the inscription that reads, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," which is allegedly the inscription above the gates of hell. So they end up in hell. There are demons. It's very scary. And 3 of them managed to make it out. I freaking love this movie. I saw this movie in theaters when it came out back in 2014. It's actually scary. It's got some great lore behind it. But it is in the catacombs, not in a cave, which is why it's number 3 on my list. But this movie, As Above, So Below, does get the Best Lore Award. The storyline behind this movie is so good. It's so intricately woven. You learn so much about your characters that you can't not like it. Let's keep going. Alright, cavers, you knew this one was coming. My number 2 favorite scary cave movie is The Descent. So for those of you who don't know, here's our basic plot. We've got this group of women who do some sort of outdoorsy trip every year, and we meet them the first year on a whitewater rafting trip. Now you know something's up when you start a scary cave movie on a different adventure. It just doesn't go well from there. So on our whitewater rafting trip, our main character, whose name is Sarah, ends up losing both her daughter and her husband in a car accident. We flash forward to a year after that, after the trauma's kind of a little more settled, and they're on their next girls' trip. Same ragtag bunch of women with a few extras that have decided to tag along with some of the other girls. So the second year we learned that they are going on a caving trip, and they're supposed to be going to Borum Caverns. That is not where they end up. They get there, rig in, rappel in, and Juno tells them that the only way out is down the pipe. They go through. While the last couple members of their team are going through, the pipe actually starts to collapse. When I say pipe, it's just a passage. That's just what she calls it. They manage to make it out with nobody getting hurt there, but like in all good scary cave movies, they now have to find another way out. Who would have thought? Several moments later, they start yelling at each other, and Juno admits that they're not in Borum Caverns. Nobody's going to be looking for them here because that's not where they are. And then we meet our monsters, who have very good senses of hearing, but have no eyes. They're blind, like most things that live in caves. They're completely white, and they're a bit humanoid, so me and my friends took to calling them albino cave gorillas. So throughout the movie, these cave gorillas are picking them off one by one until we get to the end of our movie, and we've got Juno and Sarah. You can hear the monsters. They're kind of coming in the background. Sarah's just trying to get away. But also, earlier in the film, Juno accidentally axed one of their friends right in the neck. When this happened, that friend ripped Juno's necklace off of her and had it in her hand. Sarah had found this friend dead, or nearly dead, choking on her own blood with Juno's necklace, and some of her last words were, "Don't trust her." Sarah's pissed off, because not only did Juno kill her friend, but it's also heavily implied that she was having an affair with her husband. So she has Juno's ice axe in one hand, drops the necklace in the other, axes Juno in the leg. Juno starts to scream, so the monsters start coming in on her. Sarah bolts, and this is where it gets weird. So this movie originally was not an American movie and was a standalone movie. So the original ending is she keeps going, wakes up, sees her daughter, who's dead, by the way. They blow out birthday candles, and then that's the end. And the idea is that you think they all got trapped in the cave, and then it's supposed to be this whole thing like, were there actually monsters? Or was it just Sarah's trauma, and then she murdered all of her friends? But then the movie came out in the United States, and that's not an acceptable ending here. So after that happens, Sarah wakes back up, sees light, and manages to make it out of the cave. This is also how they managed to make A Descent 2, where Sarah and a bunch of authorities go back into the cave to see what happens because she's blacked out what actually happened, but she showed up and she's like covered in blood and all of her friends are gone. So this movie's a little bit of a wild ride. It's definitely a scary movie. It's got some cave action in it. It's got some really great monsters. Not to mention it has an all-female cast, which I just love. This is also the highest rated movie on IMDb out of all of these, with a 7.2 out of 10 star rating. But every movie can only have one title, and this movie gets Best Monsters. These scary cave gorillas are the scariest things. They haunt me, don't like them, it's not good, so The Descent, Best Monsters. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Our number one scary cave movie is 2011 movie Sanctum. So this is what's happening. So we've got these cave divers. They're on a survey expedition, so they're trying to map this massive cave. They're trying to connect it to the ocean. We've got divers, we've got surveyors, we've got people who are just hauling in gear. It's a massive expedition. And right off the bat, well, you're in a little bit. We have our first death, which is somebody who has a malfunction in their equipment and they end up drowning. While they're dealing with that, a storm has actually begun to brew outside of the cave, and the cave ends up getting flooded. So they're flooded in, and again, we gotta find a new way out. Fun fact, this is actually loosely inspired by a true story. In the actual story, everybody lived. So our ragtag group of cavers continues caving, and then they actually all die in ways that could happen. So here's how we die. So I already talked about our first death was the malfunctioning air hose. We then have somebody get caught in a rapid. We have a girl whose hair gets caught in her rack. Oh my God, make me want to chop all my hair off. We have a mutiny murder, which is always a good time. We have a good old-fashioned drowning because we don't have enough dive equipment. And we have somebody at the bends. So there's just a whole slew of ways to die. But the thing that makes this movie so terrifying is that it's so realistic. People with long hair getting their hair caught in a rack is one of our biggest fears because it can actually happen. It can scalp you. It's very difficult to get out of once you're in it, and it's just very unpleasant. And it could kill you. At the end of this movie, only one person ends up making it out, and that's just barely, but they do find the ocean. This movie has great filmography. The shots are so good. As a caver, I appreciate it because it actually shows like a lot of what underground looks like because it is beautiful down there. It's also super scary because of how realistic it is. So those are my summations and ratings of my top 4 scary cave movies. What's your favorite scary cave movie? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you're watching that this Halloween. If you haven't already, head on over to Pip Explores and pick up your free day hiking checklist. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Bye, guys.